Hey, guess what, everybody? Go listen to the Break It Down show.
And now, the Break It Down show with John and Pete.
Hey, today on the Break It Down show,
we got the motherfucking Nite Train.
The motherfucking Nite Train. How many people get to say, yeah, man, I got a friend named Nite Train?
Yeah.
That's some cool shit right there.
And Nite Train, I just wanted to, this is real. I called Nite Train right before we were about to record this show. And I got him out of bed. And it's 11 o'clock on the East Coast. And he was making these sounds. This is how deep he was. That's how deep he was out. And we got DC Doug in the house. And he's laughing because he knows it's true. Nite Train couldn't even make anything other than consonants come out of his mouth when I called him.
Nite Train was not born in this country.
No.
I'm going to say this on purpose because here's the thing. He's just as American as you, me, and apple pie. Why? Because at 11 o'clock a.m. on a Sunday, meaning the day after Saturday night, he was asleep, gurgling. You had to rouse him out of bed.
Yep.
Because he had been partying too hard and too long last night. Why? Fucking America, baby.
Exactly. Nite Train was one of my interpreters in Iraq. The reason why we're talking to him is no one's telling these guys stories. He's such a wealth of information. He knew the people. He knew the region. He knew the tribes. He enabled me to get closer to the Iraqis that I had to talk to include this one general that we had to work with. And that guy liked me so much. I grew a mustache. We would talk about my mustache and all these things that allow you to connect to somebody. You don't just talk business all the time. That guy made me an honorary tribe member of one of the biggest tribes in Iraq, you know, and we all had a laugh about it. That kind of access to people is rare if you aren't set up to see it. And we talk a lot about that in the podcast. We won't get into it now, but Nite Train's a badass. He definitely went on more missions than anybody you're going to encounter. I mean, every day, once, twice a day, for years, he's out there working.
OPM, other people's missions.
Yeah.
And you're talking to Nite Train because of that, but I don't know him because of that. I'm just talking to him because he's fucking cool.
He is fucking cool, man. He is. What you've done is fascinating. You've been the senior Iraqi guy. You've been the senior American guy. You've acted as those people. You've heard the conversations. You know what we did well. You know, more importantly, you know what we didn't do well. You know, like comparing what you and I were able to do when we went out every night versus what the commanders did. And then all the guys that you saw, like Jaguar and all those other knuckleheads that you saw and how they were used. And I don't mean to necessarily make this thing like, oh, we were treated so terribly. But you know how it is. Like some guys didn't do shit. You know, you worked every fucking day and went out every day. Other guys sat around and did nothing. Partly because the Americans didn't know what to do. You know, how we talked to the Iraqis. All those things. I think there's some good lessons in there. Has anybody ever come to you and said, hey, let's learn from you? And the answer to that question is no. No, of course not. They've got no use for you. And that's what we want to try to highlight is, you know, what you did matters, and you were good at it. I mean, look at you. You're talking to the Indian surgeon, and then you got the guy who's a Liverpool fan. You're at the hospital doing what you do, and that's talk to people and connect to people.
Yeah, man.
Say hi to John, by the way.
Nite Train.
Hey, John.
You know.
Cool. So, sirens in the background with us today on the Break It Down show. Man, we are graced by the presence of a guy we really like, not only for his service to our country, but because he's funky on the bass.
Funky on the bass.
On the Break It Down show today, Nite Train.
What's up, Nite Train?
Hey, how you doing, Pete, John? Thank you for having me.
Yo, man, thanks for coming on.
We're excited, man.
Pete, tell our listeners about your relationship with Nite Train.
So here's the deal. Here's why you're going to hear about Nite Train. Nite Train was an interpreter for the American forces in Iraq. He and I worked together in Baghdad. What makes Nite Train unique is that he is a personable guy. He's intelligent. He lives in the United States, but he also understands Middle Eastern Arab culture. He was the commander's interpreter for a number of commanders in a row. So he got to have the highest level conversations between U.S. battalion commanders, those are colonels, and Iraqi generals and other officials, government officials, the highest people in that region. And we're in Baghdad, so we're in the outlying area, but you're still getting a lot of very high-level people. And Nite Train was the pivot between English and Arabic in that region. So his access to what was going on what he saw, how we reacted, how we grew and learned. He's got all that stuff in his head. He was the conversation. I mean, it was his job to interpret what was said, and there's long, high-level conversations. So he's extremely smart and has just a great story that I think you're all going to enjoy. Nite Train and I would go out every night in Baghdad and in the outlying area of Baghdad. But we would go out every night and talk to people, find out what was going on, and give commanders information that they wouldn't have otherwise got. And not necessarily because I asked it, but because of how Nite Train asked it. He was able to get people to talk, and we were very productive.
Yeah, access is one thing, but ability to influence those conversations because of your knowledge of reactions and cultural expectations and things like that is something that I think we don't emphasize enough. And for our listeners who are not multilingual or multicultural, there are different expectations. Here in America, when somebody does something or says something, we know what to expect. We know what the social norms are like, but those are different everywhere.
Yeah.
And when you have somebody who can navigate the subtleties of social norm and cultural expectation, they're a tremendous asset. So, man, thank you before we start giving you a hard time, because we will give you a little bit of a hard time. But before we do that, man, thank you for your service. We appreciate it.
You know,
No problem. Thank you.
a good example to illustrate what you just said, John, is Nite Train and I would go out literally every night. And Nite Train and I, we're a rolling party. People wanted to talk to us, and that's what we wanted to create, this atmosphere of fun and being relaxed. Well, one of the American soldiers who was there, he was a lieutenant, and he ran a team. And they would go out, and they would basically, we needed to be there, so they would stop bombing the green zone, like the center of Baghdad where all of the diplomacy was going on. We were within range of that. We were actually just outside of Sadr City. So bad dudes would hop out of Sadr City, set up a mortar tube, boom, 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 and threw mortars over towards the green zone. And they wanted that to stop. So we would be on these patrols to prevent that from happening. Well, while we're out, we're going to talk to people. So this guy would take that mission of interdiction of mortars, and he turned it into people calling into the. Listen, this is the one thing he did well, and he didn't even know it. He got Iraqis to call into the Iraqi police station to say, the Americans are invading. That's how hostile this guy walked through neighborhoods. You know, and one time, and I'll let Nite Train finish this part of the story, but and this guy would even keep Nite Train and I from going on patrols until he was ordered to allow us to do it. But one time we were going out trying to find out what was going on. So we'd go to areas where mortars were launched from, and we would talk to the people there and try to find out what's going on, what's doing. And he would go up and be like, we didn't know what's going on here. You guys know what's going on. He would kind of yell at the people. And so obviously they would ignore him or send him on his way. And one day Nite Train went right back to the same guy the lieutenant had talked to, and the story changed. You remember that time, Nite Train?
Yeah, I do.
Tell that story, please.
That's the time when we got mortared, and they didn't see anything when the lieutenant came up and talked to them, and we went back, and they gave us a description of the vehicle, of the people that actually were there, that set up the mortars, and it was just the way we approached them. It was the way we looked. Pete, you were pretty smart when you went out. You dressed in civilian clothing to make yourself more approachable. I remember that. And they would talk to us. You know, we told them we were there to help them out, to hear their story, to listen to what they wanted to know, say, and tell us. They would open up. You know, the way we talked to them, they would actually give us information, and they wanted our help. They just needed to be able to trust us and know that we were actually going to do something about the situation.
Yeah, that's right. And getting them to open up and talk. And we didn't necessarily, just for our listeners, on occasion we would be involved in finding out where bombs came from, but that wasn't our primary mission. If that stuff fell into our lap, then okay. In the time that night, go ahead.
We would go out with any unit that went out for any mission that they went out on, but we had our job to do. But you know, sometimes their mission was to find a bad guy, so we tag along so we could do what we had to do.
Yeah, and if you ever saw us work, you would swear we were just goofing around, being served lemonade and sitting in on a party or whatever it was that happened. But you get invited to sit down and have lemonade when you're not an asshole to people, you know. And this, the other guys have the interpreters too, but it's how you approach the interpretation problem, the social problem of interacting between Iraqis and Americans. And you're right. I wear civilian clothes. A lot of the time you would wear civilian clothes when you worked with me. You wore, a uniform when you worked with the commanders, and rightfully so. But when we were going out into town, we approached it differently. Can you talk to me? How did the commanders, or did anybody prepare you? Like, I took time to sit down and kind of explain what our mission and what our role was and how I wanted to do things, and got your feedback from you on how you could do it. How often did that type of thing happen where you were really brought in as part of the team?
Well, I'll tell you, when I first got there, I'll start from the beginning. I got there. It was a dark night. I had no idea what I was walking into. And at that time, in 2008, the first unit I joined, they were just about to do the Sons of Iraq program. They were handing it over to the Iraqis. If you want to explain what the Sons of Iraq program was, Pete.
The Sons of Iraq program was part of the Sunni awakening. We had basically, just to keep the story moving and flowing, we hired the Sunni military-age males to do something. And typically what that something was just stop fighting us. Here's $300 a month. Just stop fighting us so we can all make some progress. And the Sunnis agreed. Yeah. And they said, oh, okay. And so the Sons of Iraq were just, it was a social,
like a neighborhood watch kind of thing.
Right.
Where, we paid them to watch their own neighborhoods and stop fighting us.
Right. Yeah.
So I was just fresh off the bird. I came, and as soon as I walked into the command center, they told me that the Iraqi general was about to come in and see our progress on where we were at as far as getting all the files ready for them to take over the situation. And I was in a room with about 10, 15 people, 3 other interpreters. And the Iraqi general walks in, and the first thing he noticed was me. He knew right away I was somebody new. He gave me a look of I don't know who you are, and he came up to me and asked me. The first thing he asked me was if I was Iraqi, and I said yes, I am. And he said, "Where are you from? What part of Iraq?" He wanted to know basically probably what sect I was, where I stood culturally. And I told him I was actually not from, I was Iraqi, but I was born and raised in Kuwait. So in a way that kind of put him at ease, because I guess he figured I'd be neutral. I wouldn't be, biased in any way. But he called me the Kuwaiti from then on for the few months that he was there until the new general came in. That was my first introduction to the work in Iraq.
Well, that's something we all do pretty similarly. I mean, if you are in a situation where you're going to, here's so our listeners can appreciate the type of work that you did, how crucial it was to us, and what a sacrifice it was for you to perform that work. It would be as if you were somebody who was from downtown Detroit or the Bronx or any neighborhood where there was some sort of action with the FBI wanting to take down the mob, for instance, and you decided to become an informant, and you decided to fight on the side of the law enforcers, and your neighborhood would suddenly look at you differently. And depending on what you did and what you contributed and how much the mission got accomplished, you reach a point where you can't stay. You're not welcome there anymore. So for our listeners who've ever lived in an urban area, there's a level of trust that you have to gain and a level of distrust that comes from the side that you've deserted.
Yeah, and the general's trying to get an idea of who Nite Train is, so he knows who he's talking to.
Right,
who's
what
sitting
to
in front
expect.
of him. Yeah, and Iraq is the size of Texas. So, Nite Train is saying, I was born in Texas but raised in Louisiana. And that should give you a framework on who that person is, in the context of the United States.
You're not one of those assholes from Lubbock.
Yeah, you're not from Lubbock, is you? No? All right.
Yeah.
Are you queer? No? All right. Okay.
So if you are listening in from Lubbock, we actually love Lubbock. I just wanted to single you out
So, okay.
Buddy Holly.
with your one bar.
Buddy Holly.
That's right.
Hell, he was
See how American Nite Train is? He
Yeah.
fucking knows who's from Lubbock, Texas.
This is why he's good at what he does.
That's right. One bar, the beer garden, and fucking Buddy Holly.
So was that
That's it.
was that the general that you and I worked with the whole time we were there, or was
No,
that earlier? Okay.
no, he was the guy right before him.
Okay.
He didn't last too long. He got moved. He wasn't very welcome in the Medina area, and they changed him.
So back to the question: how were you prepped or coached, or were you prepped or coached on how to approach these problems, or what the commanders were trying to do?
Not really. It took a while for the unit to our units to really trust me or to share information with me. They were very antsy. They take their time, baby steps with everybody that comes in that's new. And the Army is a very tight knit group. Even though I was American, and I was a civilian basically to them. So it took them a while. But once they saw that the Iraqi side would ask for me instead of a local linguist to be in the meetings with them, they realized that I might be a little more helpful for them.
So, and let's just clear this up. So, no one ever prepped you. Now,
No.
for our listeners,
No.
if you're going to take,
Well, actually,
yeah, go ahead.
I got a lot of my information from the local interpreters over there. They actually prepped me more than our own forces did.
Right. Okay, let's talk about that in 1 second. I want to continue to answer that question and illustrate this point. So you were about to go have high-level conversations between U.S. commanders and Iraqi commanders. And, for our listeners, if you have an interpreter, you're trying to go out and cover very complicated things, maybe, just maybe, you'd want to kind of coach up the person you are about to take into this conversation so that they would have a chance of think about interpreting anything. Just talking from your personal, job lingo into your friends. It takes a while to translate things, even in English. Now we're going to translate things cross-culturally, cross English to Arabic, and nobody's bothered to say, here's what we're going to discuss today. Here is what is on my agenda. Because it's not part of what the military training requires for interpreters. So that's left to Nite Train. And
Yes.
okay, so you started getting coached up, though, by the locals. Talk about that.
Well, a lot of the U.S. interpreters would be standoffish or wouldn't really communicate or socialize with the local interpreters out of fear that they didn't know who these guys were. They were still, no matter what, even though they spoke English, they were still local residents, and they didn't know to trust them that well. But I threw myself into that because I wasn't getting any help from the U.S. forces or from anybody. Nobody was really prepping me or telling me what our mission was and what the area was all about. And I've never been to that area before, so I would go in there and socialize with them. And a lot of them were very nice and very friendly, very helpful. And they would give me the breakdown on the area, on the history of the area, on what it used to be and what it is now, and I even got what the locals thought of us being there, and all kind of very useful information that really I don't think any of our guys were privy to,
or really interested in, right? I mean, that information lived on their camp.
Yes, it was all there, and they were a wealth of information, and nobody really took advantage of that. Nobody sat there and talked to these guys. They basically use us linguists as mouthpieces, but just tell this person exactly what I'm saying. But unfortunately, a lot of situations that really doesn't work, where you just literally interpret, because there's certain nuances, certain things, certain ways you could put a question to a person that would get you more information, just from a cultural aspect. And, and at first I did what I was told. They told me, tell this person this thing. And even sometimes the way they would say it would kind of be, to us it's no big deal, but to them it would be kind of insulting. And at first I did it. I said, okay, this guy is an officer. He knows better than me. I'm going to just do my job and tell this other person exactly what it's saying. And then the person in front of me would either shut down or give a vague answer or not give us anything that was useful.
Did you have the license to let that officer know, hey, that didn't work? Or do you have to just keep interpreting? How were you handled early on?
Well, at first I would just interpret exactly what the person would say, and then after a while, once I got to know that officer, and I would tell him, I would say, listen, I understand what you're trying to do, and I understand what you're trying to say. If you let me rephrase your question or change it up a little bit, I could probably get you a little more information. I could probably get you what you want. And some of them most of them would say, okay, they would trust me to do that. And I would tell them, I will let you know exactly how I'm going to change the question. And I'll tell you what I'm going to say before I say it. And you can give me a go or no go on that. And then after a while, it started working. It made things a lot easier.
So you've got the complexity of trying to translate between languages, between cultures, trying to understand what's going on. That you're not pre-coached to understand what you're going to try to do, so you can think through some of these things, which makes your job it makes your job harder. Okay, so you worked with a lot of different commanders. You worked with me. The U.S. military training forces us to make you guys into mouthpieces. It teaches us to not trust you. That's just the training. That's not a reflection on individual soldiers doing a bad job. It's just what the training is, and part of the point of this show is to illustrate. Look, we've got to be better at that. Here you have a guy like Nite Train, and there's 100 Nite Trains in the country if you let them happen. We can talk about Spider later on, a guy that was useless that we turned useful because we allowed him to do what he was good at doing. So what Nite Train is illustrating is that, look, my job is hard. I'm not just changing words. I'm changing thoughts and ideas, and I'm trying to get something out of this person, trying to get some cooperation. And you, Army man, aren't familiar with these people. You don't even know the region because you're not sitting and playing cards with the interpreters at night. I am. Let me do my job. So when were you most effectively used and why?
I think, unfortunately, the most effective I was working with you, with another civilian. All the other times, working with commanders, of course, whenever, in the beginning, every time there was a new commander, it would take time for that person, or that commander, to actually trust me and bring me into the mission statement or what they were trying to achieve. Because every unit that came in had a different agenda, had a different thing they wanted to accomplish. And at first, I wouldn't even get to meet the commander for a few days, or they were busy getting their thing going until they needed somebody to interpret something. But it took so long to get to where they were comfortable with me to get me involved in any kind of situation. But I think the most effective I was working with you, because we got a lot accomplished. If they use I don't know if they use the information we got for them as effectively as they should have, but we got things done.
If you like the show,
And you do,
send us some pictures of your movies.
don't do that. Support the show.
There are 3 ways you can support us.
Number 1, go to iTunes or Stitcher or wherever you listen to podcasts.
And leave a 5-star rating and review.
It helps with the show metrics and helps us get better placement. Number 2,
Visit our website.
www.breakitdownshow.com.
We've got an Amazon and an eBay link.
Same Amazon, same eBay, you know and love, but they give us a little kickback when you get to their site from ours. And number 3, leave comments about the shows that you like. We want to know what you think, how you feel.
Tell us how to make the show better. We greatly appreciate it.
Now back to the show.
We like movies.
All right, I'm going to jump in because that last point that you made is, I think, crucial to this conversation. We're not talking about something that's unique to the military. This happens everywhere. Whenever there are executives, these are highly trained individuals with a background that allows them to make high-level decisions, often that are very important and affect a lot of people. So a general or a CEO or a technology officer, whatever it is, in a company or in our military, that person has to enter that occupation with a level of confidence that allows them to say, listen, I am the boss, and I'm going to tell you what to do, and I expect you to comply with my instructions. This is universal among any organization. So when you, however, insert these dynamics into a military situation, we're talking about lives at risk. And maybe that ratchets up the stakes, but it's no different in the ability for somebody who actually is the boots on the ground, in this case literally, or in corporate speak figuratively. The folks with the boots on the ground understand the dynamics of the situation much more intimately. So it works best when there's a level of trust established. And it goes both ways. The commander or the executive has to be able to trust the interpreter, and the interpreter has to be able to say, okay, I am emotionally involved in this mission, and I get what it is, and I'm going to not only comply, but I'm going to further the mission because I want it to go further. So those are two things where you guys were able to meet in the middle. Now, your ability to be successful with Pete, and here's the point that I think is most crucial, your ability to be successful with Pete was based on relationship things. You guys came at that trust dynamic from a similar place, and you allowed people to be conversational and loose and candid with you. And here's where it breaks down. You have to hand that information over to somebody who's not necessarily as aware.
See, when Pete had got there, I'd been there for a few months, and Pete knew that okay, this guy's been here. He was working with the commander, so he must have some contact. Pete knew this. The new commander that came in either didn't know about that or didn't care about that. You know, you have somebody here who was with the unit before you, who was working with the commander of that unit, who has, I mean, let's say it's literally all the phone numbers of all the high-level people on the Iraqi side.
Yes.
It didn't really even I guess register with them or matter, or they had a different agenda, you know. And that's another issue, that fighting this war a year at a time, a unit at a time, also made it very difficult for us achieving anything over there, because every unit that came in had a different agenda and a different mission.
Or maybe the same agenda and the need to feel and felt the need to start over again because the last guys couldn't have done it as well as we're going to do it.
And that's also true. Yeah. They thought they could do it better or more efficiently.
There's a couple of great things to illustrate these things, and pardon me for war stories, but that's part of the reason why we're trying to do this. The reason why these conflicts are so tough is that we don't even know how to manage Nite Train and what he does. So Nite Train absolutely was the Rolodex for the commander. People would call him unsolicited because he represented the U.S. commander. Now, ask the commander if they ever saw Nite Train as an extension of them. Nite Train, how many times did a commander ask you, hey, who called you today?
Not any time.
Right.
Unless they asked me to call somebody, and if they called me back.
Right, but you got calls all the time from people. So here's a guy that is an active messaging system to the people, and no one bothered to ask him, hey, who's calling you? Or who do we need to be talking to?
That happened with all linguists over there that had access to phones. You know, a lot of the locals weren't allowed to keep a phone on them, but the ones that did have phones would get a lot of calls, a lot of information, and it went nowhere.
Well, that's been a recurring theme in our conversations with people. Whenever we sort of dissect what we fucked up, it usually comes back to, well, and then we got as far as we got, and we were really picking up a head of steam, but then we left, and some new guys came in, and they didn't give a shit about what we had done, so they didn't pick up where we left off. They started over again. And all of that good progress that we made was really washed away, and all of the reputation that we had built up was not only washed back to zero, but it drew into the negative because, well, those assholes are just going to come over here again, and whatever we start, they're just going to fuck it up.
Think about this. So the 82nd is a fantastic unit, historic. And what they're known for is they will work. So the 82nd was going to leave the area that I was in, and coming in was the 210 Mountain guys. And the 82nd were not going to screw their legacy up. They were absolutely going to give a great handoff to the 210. So we worked on these things called smart books that had profiles for all the people. We updated everything. We spent, look, we were doing 36-hour days getting these things ready.
Yep.
They were as good as we could possibly make them in little multi-books. And just in my little section, we made a bunch of them, right? 210 couldn't be bothered. I mean, the most expensive little smart book you can make, we had spent thousands and thousands and thousands of man hours trying to get these things up to where they needed to be. Because over the course of the year, you're meeting people, you're handing off. This is a dossier book. And nobody in the 210 even cared. We don't care about that.
All the 210 really cared about, which I don't, which is I understand completely, was getting every man back home safe. Because by that time they figured that everything was pretty much done. Their biggest mission was handing over our camp to the Iraqis. And,
so here you go. Here's the last big push by the 82nd, and it's disregarded. And they ultimately have the same goal. We want to get everybody from the 82nd back home. We're not going to screw this up, right? And so here you have a major effort from the one brigade to the next, and it was dead before it even happened. So that just sort of illustrates how tough it is to do these transitions. When you talk about the 1 year at a time fighting these wars, that's a big reason why, right there. A whole operational push, a lot of people involved, a lot of time, and it didn't matter at all.
So what's the lesson?
Well, one of the lessons is make sure you talk to your night trains. Find your interpreters. Get a hold of them. Night train, will you ever hand it off in a way to say, listen, you're me. I'm a commander. You're a commander. I'm talking to myself here. This guy is invaluable. Was that conversation ever had in front of you?
No. I thought the first colonel I worked with, a great man, a very smart man, a very passionate man, actually. He really wanted to get things done, and he really cared about making Iraq better. Last conversation I had with him was we sat down. He pulled out a couple of cigars. He was like, Nite Train, I think you'd be valuable if you stayed here and worked with this incoming commander. He's got his own linguist. My advice to you is leave, go to a better place. Because at the time of that, you remember that Cobb wasn't a very nice place.
Right.
He's like, I don't know if he understands. He'll know how valuable you are. You're welcome to stay if you feel you want to stay. If I was you, I would leave. I elected to stay because I thought, well, maybe if I talk to this commander and let him know my contacts and let him know who I know in this area and what I know about this area, he might use me. But he didn't really use me that much. He had his own linguist who was actually an Iraqi American soldier, very good at interpreting. Very good interpreter, understood the culture, but did not know the area and did not have the contacts I had. So he used me sparingly whenever the other interpreter wasn't available. But I should have listened to the first commander and left, maybe. So there wasn't really the handoff was
no handoff, and a guy that has fantastic knowledge of the area. I mean, how many things had to be restarted or never even accomplished because you can't hand them off? And again, that goes back to that training that doesn't happen. And so the lesson, John, is that right there. It's so easy to go back and lose progress on things because we're simply not prepared to make these transitions.
I have to say, because we've had a number of these conversations, and Nite Train, thank you again for highlighting these things, but we've talked to a lot of commanders, and I've gotten a lot of information just by hanging out with Pete that I didn't previously have about the way we ran that war and the way that our military operates. And I'm going to say this out loud, and I'm going to put it up on the web, and it's going to live forever. And I'm going to say it anyway, because it breaks my heart to say it. But the thing that I've learned, based on my experience in the corporate world and the things that I've learned about the United States military, the U.S. military is top-heavy, and that top-heaviness includes a lot of dumb shits. So thank you, to everybody who serves. I really do appreciate it, and I don't mean to diminish anybody who sincerely serves. But, man, time after time, we hear about these guys who, well, we're going to put this asshole in charge, and he's going to go over there and fuck it up. I've heard that entirely too many times in the conversations that we've had. It sucks. And it goes back to a conversation that we had quite a while ago with John Noggle. Mm-hmm. And, just the fact that there's a lot of incentive to advance within the military. And so there are a lot of officers, perhaps too many, and that we're attracting, some passionate people, but in a lot of cases, not the greatest talent, and it sucks. So we got to get better.
Yeah, and we don't need to talk about training the whole time, but since we're going to put stuff up on the web for posterity, let's just say this: if you're a commander at NTC, if you're a commander at JRTC, if you are a commander at TRADOC, or somebody who has the ability to influence things, listen. We can do better at interpreter operations. We can actually develop training that allows us to recognize and leverage Nite Train. You want to keep your interpreter? Great. Keep that person. But Nite Train's going to be there anyhow. He's already paid for. Why not have him ride shotgun and advise? Have him as your advisor, because the guy is brilliant. Look, where he works now, he's networked into people already, because he does this. He networks. We can choose to ignore that and go backwards all the time and accomplish limited things. Yeah, go ahead.
Pete, what you just said is it's so true. That commander that came in and had his own linguist and interpreter. I went out with him one time as a linguist. We were on a mission, and I was a linguist for another officer on the same mission, and we sat in a room with an Iraqi general that I knew very well, and I let the commander's interpreter do his thing, and I just sat there without saying anything. And the Iraqi general, whenever he would be talking to the commander, would look at me and look at me to interpret for him, because he was so used to working with me. And I knew all the history of the area, and I knew all the situations. And I would keep telling him, sir, you need to talk to so-and-so, not me. And unfortunately, a lot of the information that he was talking about, the new linguist had no idea what he was talking about. He didn't know the names. He didn't know the tribes. He didn't know the issues of the area. And that meeting actually, didn't really go anywhere because of that. So.
And I'll reiterate, it probably not only didn't go anywhere, it went backwards. Because the Iraqi general who kept looking at you would go look now at our commanding officer and go with that look of, I can see it. I can see it across the table. You're a fucking dumb shit. You got this guy right here in Nite Train who knows all of this history, understands the dynamics, understands what we are going through in our struggles, and what really has unnerved us all this time. And you got this other guy who you insist on using, who's probably, terrific soldier, but that makes you a shithead. And that's our commanding officer.
And that's another thing. The other linguist was a soldier. He stood there as a soldier. He stood there with his weapon to his side. So that kind of
there's a great way to break the ice, huh?
Exactly. Puts the general at this standoffish a place, and he knew I was a civilian. He knew I had no skin in the game. He knew I was Iraqi by birth, but I was from a different country. I knew he didn't care where I was, he knew I wouldn't change anything he said. He knew I wouldn't distort it.
Yeah, so you were neutral to the situation just after really the success of everybody involved.
Because unfortunately, you had these local linguists who were of a different sect from the commander, the Iraqi commander, and they would change things up a little bit. They would interpret things the way they wanted to interpret them. But he knew that he could trust me.
There's a lot of nuance that goes on in these meetings that you can't see. And again, a guy like Nite Train is invaluable. So how am I going to approach this problem? I'm going to come in and say, Nite Train, you know this general better than I do. How do we approach this? How do we talk to this guy? I'm going to leverage Nite Train's information, and he's going to talk to me. Maybe he doesn't know, but I'm going to get him thinking in those terms. It's just a different way of approaching the problem. I'm going to afford him some trust. He's on my side. He's wearing my uniform. I can test Nite Train. There's ways to do that. You can bring another interpreter in and listen to what happens and do it. But that stuff isn't done. So you're trying to establish rapport with a partnered nation, a guy who's a general. You're trying to establish rapport with this guy, and all you've proven, as go back 5 minutes in time in our conversation, all you've proven to the Iraqi commander is that you're a douche. You don't know what's going on. And that guy can't afford to extend you any trust now because he can't trust you. You're not using the guy that he knows. You're trying to establish rapport. Well, Nite Train is rapport. He already knows the guy. And let me.
The truth is, he's not trying to establish rapport.
He has it. Yeah, he is the rapport. So, you mean the commander?
The commander.
Yeah, the
he doesn't
commander's
give a
not.
shit about rapport.
He's not focused on.
He's
it.
the bull in a china shop. He
Well,
just wants
let
to
me
walk
tell you-
in and swing his dick around in a circle.
Let me tell you what this unit did. The general needed to come to the camp. Now, this is the Iraqi general. He owns this battle space. It is his space. We're there, and the American commander, of course, is also very dominant in that area, right? The Iraqi general comes. He gets denied access to the camp. Now, think about that. This guy is the boss. And they wouldn't let him on an American camp. What does that say about our partnering? What does that say about our respect for that? If any of our generals went anywhere and they were denied access, what would they do? They would lose their mind. They'd be shit flying.
They
everywhere.
don't just expect. I mean, again, we're talking about the highest level individuals in command of this situation and the people involved, and they don't just expect access. They expect the red carpet to be rolled out.
That's right.
And that's what they rightfully should expect.
There would often be traffic at the gate, incoming, outgoing, right? And I will promise you, and I've heard it, when the American commander says, "Everybody get out of my fucking way, I'm coming out," guess what happens? Everybody gets the fuck out of the way. You're going to leave an Iraqi general sitting there cooking in his car? Oh, man. You're going to pay for that for months. How long was he pissed about that, Night Train?
You know what? I'm going to change the subject because I'm tired of talking about how fucking douchey we are. We're a bunch of assholes.
I do want him to answer that last question. How long was the general mad about that shit?
It took me forever. I told him, I said, it took me forever to convince him to come back and to give this guy a chance. I told him, it's a new unit. They don't know the area. They don't know who to trust yet. I said, leave it to me. I'll get everything straightened out. I took forever. Really.
Yeah. I mean, shit. Yeah. One time I farted at the dinner table. Pete didn't leave that alone for 6 weeks. I had to hear about that shit for weeks. Imagine if he had left me sitting cooking in my car at the gate. So yeah, I get that that would piss me off. In fact, he's probably this Iraqi general is probably sitting wherever he's sitting at his house, and he's enjoying himself, hopefully. But he's thinking to himself, yeah, those Americans are a bunch of douches. But I love America, so I'm going to change the subject and say, Nite Train, I'm going to bring this show back to you, man. How's life now? How you doing?
Life's good. I'm doing good.
All right.
I've got a job I enjoy doing. As you know, I play music on the weekends, so it's pretty good.
You're living a great American life because you're on American soil. You're doing work, and then at night on the weekends, you're partying. You're having fun. You're playing music.
I get paid to do something I enjoy. Absolutely, and free drinks.
Yeah.
Who's your inspiration on the bass?
You get to play and you get free drinks. Where all the rest of us are playing at the wrong places.
You got to find those places. They give you free draft. I mean, I don't know if that's good or bad, but it's free.
It sounds good to me.
Yeah.
Free's my price. So, talk to us about playing the bass. Who inspires you? Who do you find to be particularly appealing?
Well, our band is a cover band. We play with mostly 90s and 2000s alternative pop, rock, and Sublime, Weezer, Sum 41, Blink 182, all that kind of stuff. My influences. My father was a musician in Iraq, in the northern Iraq area. He played in a little salsa band. Actually, he played trumpet.
He played trumpet in a salsa band in northern Iraq.
This is why you gotta love Nite Train.
Yeah. Well, they had like a bunch of, I guess, foreign American and English contractors out there back then in the, I guess, 50s or 40s or whatever.
Yeah.
So they had a little band, and he raised both me and my brother to be musicians. So
what's your dad's name?
Good work, Pop.
What's your dad's
His
name?
name is Louis.
So they're like, Louis, do you know Ring of Fire? He starts doing it. He starts blowing that thing.
Not only
he's into the Cuban music, really. He likes the Cuban trumpet playing and all that stuff.
So you don't expect that to come out of Nite Train, do you? But there it is.
Yeah. Man, I'm telling you, that's the theme that, okay, 2 themes for this show. Boy, we got a lot of shitheads fucking things up over there. But the other theme, the more important theme to me is we're all the same, man. Mm-hmm. We just like to dance and have a good time, have some drinks, enjoy our friends.
Yep.
Now, here's Nite Train, the interpreter for the American military. And now he's here living a great life in America. He's playing music. He's playing Blink 182 on Friday nights.
Nite Train was born in Iraq, lived in Kuwait for a while. How many years have you been in the U.S.? You've been here for...
I've been here 30 years now. In 85 I came here.
And this is a guy we had trouble trusting. You guys are Jacksonville Jaguar fans, The guy loves American.
that might have been
that might be the problem. That I was a fan of the Jaguars.
Yeah.
That's why they didn't fit.
There's your downfall right there.
That's it. That's the problem.
I think so.
I will say this, and I don't want to get back into the negativity side of things, but here's the standard Americans. Here's how we do it. And I'm going to blow my own horn here, but it's because of Nite Train I was able to do this stuff. The general took a liking to the stuff that myself and my partner Adriana that we did, and he said these words: "Where are my advisors? Where are my cultural advisors? Where are they?" And he's asking for us specifically because we gave a damn about the process. We let Nite Train do what he was supposed to do. And he saw us as his asset. Now that's partnering. That's what you're supposed to try to go for. And it's possible if you'll let Nite Train be trusted. If you ask him, hey, what did your dad do? Oh, your dad was into Cuban music? How did and if that doesn't start your conversation off in a direction where you're allowed to trust Nite Train, then you need to go back to trust school and learn to develop an appreciation for people.
A lot of these meetings were there wasn't a lot of fun in them. It's just work and trying to get by, trying to get through the day. We had fun going out, me and you. That was fun.
Yeah, we would go out every day. I was telling Doug on the way over. Doug, by the way, DC Doug is in the house in the studio audience.
Guest engineer.
Checking things out. So this is how often Nite Train and I would go out. I wore my Velcro out in my ballistic vest, my bulletproof vest. I walked so much the Velcro's like we quit, and I had to get a new vest. That's how much we patrolled. We patrolled all the time, and we saw some incredible things. We talked to this one guy about Iranian influence and presence in the area. And no one's going to tell us, yes, the Iranians are around the corner, because that means they're dead. They're never going to say that. But this guy anchored himself to, like, the patio pillar, like, leaned up against it, like, okay, he's really nervous. Like, we'd hit on something, and Nite Train recognized it right away. He probably didn't see the body language, but he heard the words. And this guy's arm started winding up the pillar, just trying to anchor himself to this thing because he was so nervous about talking about the Iranian presence that it was obvious there was some kind of Iranian. Do you remember that dude and how afraid he was? He was just, he had to hold on to something as tight as he could because he was in a hurricane, apparently, the way he was latched onto his patio. It was hilarious.
Yeah. And that's also probably I'm sure they got asked that question before from other units or other people, and they clam up, but we knew how to talk to them, and we got them a little more at ease. And they gave us some more information than others.
I think what every young man should aspire to is to be able to say these words: I got a friend named Nite Train, and we used to go out every night and bomb the green zone. That's good living.
Yeah.
Hey, thanks for coming on the show, man. We really appreciate your time, and I think we're going to go let you get some sleep.
Yeah, man, get back to bed, and
All right.
we'll do this again.
Sounds
Seriously,
good.
Thank you very much for telling your story. Because
Yeah, we
it
really
is
appreciate
fascinating.
it.
No problem. It was my pleasure.
All right, brother.
Take it easy, man.
All right. Thank you.
All right, let's stay on me and you, because I want to talk about that show, and I think this show deserves an epilogue.
Epilogue.
My frustration that I let get out has been bottling up over the course of several shows, and we've talked to guys at different levels of the mission, and we failed to do some things that were very important, but we failed to do some things that, this is the frustrating part, isn't that we failed to do some things, because that happens.
Right.
My frustration is at our failure to do some things that we as America are supposed to be good at. Namely, to do right by all the people. We are a government of the people and for the people. We ought to understand the dynamic that everybody who lives somewhere just wants the same shit. We want our kids to grow up safe. We want them to succeed. We want them to lead a little better life than we led. We want to all get along.
That is a common thread, and I use those threads. I would call them lowest common denominators. These are the things that matter to all of us. When you break us down, here's the lowest point.
Yeah.
We all love our kids. We all don't want to get cancer.
Yep.
We all just want to be able to get through the day.
Hierarchy
of needs. Hierarchy, exactly.
That's right.
Maslow becomes Trump in these kind of conflict situations.
Well, we could talk about it from the Maslow perspective, but I think you and I prefer to talk about it as the Henry Rollins idiom.
Sure.
We all want the same shit.
Yeah. We might disagree on the
You
method.
right.
Yeah.
You might not like the way that I go about it. I might not agree that the way you go about it is the same way. But let's break it down
Understand
to
this.
the original
Yeah.
thing. We all want the same shit.
Yeah.
And I think that's really what resonates with me from Nite Train, because he's American through and through.
Right.
He just happens to be of Iraqi descent.
Yeah.
And, that's wonderful because he brings a lot to the table.
Think about this. Here's a guy that has been in the U.S. for 20, 30 years, right? He's on an American camp. He lives in America when he's not working. And people look at him with a stink eye, and they think, oh, I don't know if I trust that guy. First off, fuck you. That guy's been an American longer than you've been alive, and what a resource. And yet we can't. So listen, again, this is about the military and the State Department. Let's be honest about that too. It's their inability to get out of their own way, develop training that allows them to use the resources that are there. There are more than one Nite Train out there. I've found other good interpreters. Nite Train's just very articulate and friendly. But I would start by saying, I trust you. I need your help. I can't do what you do. And that's true. I can't be born in Iraq. I can't know Middle Eastern culture and Arabic culture like he can. I can't replace that. Why wouldn't I want to leverage that? But that's not what the training supports. The training supports he's going to lie to me. He's going to trick me. I mean, that's the training. The training is watching a video of a guy interpret poorly. And yes, you have to watch out for that. And there are methods for dealing with that. But what's way more important is the advanced interpreter operation of allowing this. This guy's you. This guy's also the other guy. Figure out how to leverage that guy so you can get more out of him. And that's what I did with Nite Train.
Well, you can make it about the military and the State Department. I just relate it to my experience with people because I don't have that same experience. My experience with people is not that much different. I mean, it can be inculcated in the training or it can be inculcated from our parents.
That's true.
And a lot of times, I mean, this generation, I think we're going to look back on 50 years from now as a turning point in the enlightenment of culture in America, because this is the first. I mean, we got gay marriage, and whether whether you are gay or straight or whatever your standpoint is, my point in that whole thing, I happen to support it, but I don't support it because, I want people to do anything except let people do what the fuck they want. So here's my point is, if you are an American, then guess what? You should love that we get to do whatever we want. And don't be a fucking hypocrite and say, well, we get to do whatever we want, except for that guy. He doesn't get to do what he wants. Because guess what? He's not forcing you to do that.
Right.
He's not forcing you to do anything. So if you want to bake a cake for a gay wedding, bake a fucking cake. If you don't want to, your gay son to get married to somebody, well, that's your problem. And I empathize with that on a very personal level where it could be the same. I mean, you could have a son who is straight and wants to marry this chick who is going to be shitty to him. But don't want them to get married because of that. Other than that, leave people alone. Fucking A. And then, let me take this a step further. Get to know your goddamn neighbors. Because if I lived next door to Nite Train, I'm fairly positive that guy would be my fucking homeboy. You know what I mean? He listens to Blink 182. He plays bass at night. Guess what? He's going to be playing at a bar around the corner from me, and I'm going to go see him. And I'm going to have a good time, and I'm going to have some drinks, and I'm going to high-five him on stage, and I'm going to go home that night and have a, great time with my wife because I took her dancing. That makes him terrific. I could give a shit that he's from Iraq. And in fact, if I find out that he's from Iraq, I ought to maybe get to know what that's like because that might feed into my good time a little more. And all I'm trying to do is feed into my good time, man. Mm-hmm. So do that, Americans.
Feed into the good time.
Your good time. Get to know your neighbors. Get to know the people around you. Don't throw up preconceived notions about how you think people might be because guess what? They might be just as American as us.